Hi, everyone. We are here for our weekly Q&A. We hope you're having a good week. And this week we got the majority of questions on triggers, which doesn't surprise me at all since we've been talking about parts of the self, trauma, a lot of that kind of stuff. So basically, if we kind of like tie together the general trends, it seems that the questions really gravitate around explaining more what triggers are and how they work and what strategies can be implemented when someone is feeling triggered.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that comes up a lot because triggers are related to trauma, but triggers can also just be related to difficult events,
Mhm.
that someone has been through.
Mhm.
And I guess a very simple way to explain what triggers are, and then Stephanie, of course, I would love to know what you think,
Mhm.
is that it's almost like a trigger is how you are interpreting an external event based on past experiences.
Mhm.
It could be, as we can say, stimulus, maybe like someone is saying something or someone is doing something, and you are taking in that information, but you are reacting in a way that is clearly not just based on the information that you're given in the moment. There's more that is coming up, and generally that more that is coming up has to do with previous experiences
Yes.
that this event in the now is sort of tapping into, and you are feeling a series of physical reactions, emotional reactions. You can feel cognitively that something is changing.
Mhm.
It's similar and different for everyone. For example, it could be, and because we're talking about our holiday offer now on social media, it could be something related to, you're at a family dinner and someone says something that's triggering.
Mhm. Mhm.
For example, like, oh, you're still doing that singing thing. When are you going to get a real job?
Right.
And that can be very triggering, but it's triggering because that person has carried a lot of emotions and has past experiences with
Mhm.
their singing self.
Mhm.
And so suddenly there's a reaction to that. It can feel like anger. It can feel like a lot of bodily sensations. It can feel like brain fog, because in
Mhm.
that moment, all this flooding is not making you think straight.
Right.
And then the question is how to navigate that,
Right.
because that can quote unquote make the situation worse or make you feel worse, which is something that we can unpack because that's true but not true. How to use that trigger to be your friend.
Yeah. It's really tough, I think, because especially, with family dynamics or relationships that you've been in for a long time, these dynamics are set up over and over and over and over again. They become habits, really. And so we had a client last week who now, as we're going into the holidays, um, she said that her mom, they were all sitting around at the dinner table, and her mom started talking about a girl that she grew up with and all these wonderful things that she's doing now. And she said that she had gotten really triggered by that. And because, like you just said, Eliza, it's not just her mom talking about this girl that she grew up with and all these wonderful things she's doing now. There's this whole narrative built in to that comment, which is you're not doing enough. The client, the mother is thinking about the client, you're not doing enough, or this girl really has it together, and what are you doing with your life? And there's all these judgments, and that's part of this narrative that's going on underneath, and
Mm-hmm.
that then creates the trigger of like, I know what you're really saying here, even though you're not saying it to me. And that then causes a reaction, a somatic experience in the body, a reaction in the body, like, oh, like, either a clenching or that nervous thing, like you want to say something, but you can't. And then you just kind of get trapped in that state.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really hard because we all know we have these certain dynamics already set up through practice through the years. And somehow then disrupting those patterns or habits, it's really hard to do because they become so ingrained. Like, think about, different family members and the patterns you have with them, and how they're going to trigger you. You can predict it. And still it gets to you, right? You know,
Yeah.
because you get caught in the moment, you have that. It's just I feel it more in like a sound, like a
Yeah.
kind of sound. That's my trigger effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, so okay, the thing becomes then, you know, predictively a lot of the time who's going to trigger you and how they're going to trigger you. What is it going to be, you know?
Mhm.
And then if you can prepare for that, and then okay, so then managing the triggers. There are so many different things that you can do to either prepare or do then retroactively. Um, One of my favorite things to do is to prepare for these conversations in a way that you imagine yourself saying exactly what you wish you could say, even if it's something you'd never say. So let's say with this client and her mom, and we did this actually, this exercise with
Mhm.
her. Okay, your mom just said that about the girl you grew up with. What do you really wish you could say to her in that moment? Well, I know what you're really saying, mom. I know you're saying that I'm not living up to my potential and I'm not doing enough and I'm a loser and I'm lazy and I'm, you know, whatever.
Mhm.
And then we had her talk it out exactly as she would want to be able to say it. And then maybe come to, you know, like meet in the middle somewhere and come to a reaction that next time this happens, maybe she could try. So, you know,
Yeah.
whatever that would be, that wouldn't be going all the way and saying everything you wish you could say, but saying something that makes you feel like you're sticking up for yourself a little bit, that you're
Mhm.
respecting yourself, you know, and
Yeah.
not just letting yourself be hammered.
Absolutely. And I think especially in certain settings, like we talk about the somatic component too, it's like if you're sitting at the table and you feel suddenly very angry, like
Mm,
you might slip into, wanting to suppress it,
right,
instead of like redirecting it in some way.
right,
So part of it is, what can you say to yourself? What can you say to the people out there? And what can
right.
you do with your body? Sometimes it could be even just visualizing all that energy going into the floor, or you
Yep.
can clench your fists under the table.
Clenching fist is really good. Yep.
Yeah, something that won't just suppress, because then
Mhm.
it's going to come bouncing back, and suppressing emotion is just not healthy.
Right, right,
So yeah, maybe restructuring what you can say to the people, and then maybe validating yourself internally. Like, just because they say this, it doesn't make it true.
right.
Something that feels right internally.
Yep, exactly.
So what is an example that you would give of a good, safe way to express that anger, but in a way that is not all that the person wish they could say, that is
Right.
just for them?
Yeah. So it's interesting because so with this client, she came upon herself as next time, because she knows her mom is going to bring this girl up again, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
talk about all the wonderful things she's doing. And so where the client came to is the awareness that, so like when that, and we practice this too in dialogue, you know, us, one of us being the
Yeah.
mother. And um, so when that statement comes at her, then practicing, first of all, the recognition of, this is mom's anxiety, not mine, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to recognize right now that mom has anxiety and she's projecting it onto me. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to take that on right now. Okay. Awareness is key. And then sitting with that. So then realizing when it's coming at you, it's not as angering. Yes, it's still triggering. It's still got all of this stuff. But when you have that recognition, then thinking to herself, um, wow, it's so interesting that you always feel the need to bring up so and so
Mm-hmm.
and compare her to me. Boy, you must have just a sense of loss or some kind of void, because I'm just not what you wanted me to be, or I'm not what you thought I was going to be. And oh, isn't that too bad for you? Like having this kind of where she's not blaming herself for this,
Mm-hmm.
but realizing that it's her mother's anxiety that's being projected onto her. And then having that kind of reaction, and then being able to kind of stabilize herself in that. And then her reaction for real would be, oh, isn't that wonderful for so and so?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, isn't that great?
Yeah.
Rather than her usual reaction, which would be like, well, great. Like, I don't care. Like, like, because it's all this build up stuff. She could kind of let that go and be like, isn't that great for her?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not giving the mom any of that angst that the mom really is feeding off of in that
Yeah,
situation. Do you know what I mean? So if the
absolutely.
client answers, well, good for her, then the mom knows that she's tapped
Mm-hmm.
into something, and the mom can use that because she's working with her own anxiety at this point.
Yeah.
her mother's anxiety.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if the client just says, oh, isn't that wonderful for so and so? And
Mhm.
there's nothing there then for the mom to grab onto and to work with.
Yeah,
Um,
that is so
that
key.
that's where she came to. And that's a lot of the times what will happen. But again, this takes practice, and it takes really, really clear awareness in the moment,
Yeah.
because the trigger can be this automatic reaction that happens. So you have to
Mhm.
stay really focused and like, okay, who is pouring this onto me? What are they projecting onto me?
Yep.
And then how can I recognize it as theirs, not mine?
Mhm. Exactly. And I think that, like you were saying before, like sort of like knowing this comes up, like walking into a situation with certain expectations, not because it's like, oh God, this dynamic, like you're trapped in the dynamic, but because you just separate and think, this is this person's stuff.
Right.
They have their own pain. I can detach with compassion. And if you walk into the situation knowing that that might happen, you will very less easily get trapped,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you will feel less triggered. I mean, there's even studies that indicate that setting an expectation actually changes the brain reactivity to it. Like if you walk into a gambling situation, being very aware that you will lose money, actually your brain reacts differently.
Right.
Whereas if you're just neutral, once you lose the money, the reactivity is spiking completely.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, really interesting.
yeah. So that can help for sure.
And then I want to add one thing too. So there's that preparation, right? That kind of cognitive preparation. But then also there's an exercise that we do, which we can lovingly call eye of the storm or eye of the hurricane. But then to feel in the body. So the idea of it is that you imagine the scene like a hurricane going on around you, and you yourself are in the middle, which is the eye, which is completely calm.
Mhm.
The eye of the hurricane is there's no craziness going on. And to actually feel that in your body and then look at the scene from that perspective. So you've got this connection and alignment and peace in the eye, but you're looking around you. I mean, you can just do it in your mind right now, imagining all of the, you know, the stuff that's happening with your family dynamics. If you just
Mhm.
watch it like the hurricane around you, knowing you're in the eye, then that
Yeah.
can give your body kind of this sense of it
Yeah.
won't touch me unless
Mhm.
I let it, because I'm in the eye right now. I'm safe in the eye. And I can just watch and observe all of this craziness happening in the hurricane around me.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is so key. And you explained it so well. I love it. I'm even feeling it myself as you're talking about
Yeah.
it.
I mean, you can actually see, like, if you imagine a hurricane, so like cars flying through the air. I always imagine, for some reason, I always imagine a cow like hurtling through. I don't know where that came from, but okay, so you see everything flying and um, if you imagine then in this kind of context, what would it look like at Thanksgiving dinner? Well,
Yeah.
all of the comments and the rubs and the passive aggressive stuff and the, you know, all of the stuff that's happening. You imagine that's all the stuff that's just floating around you.
Mhm.
So comments from mom, comments from dad, comments from Aunt Shirley and Uncle Bob, you know,
Yep.
they're all floating around in this hurricane.
Yeah.
You're just in the eye of it.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So you all let us know how this works for you. And if you have more questions and if we can support you, you know, specifically with some of these things. And we're always here for you, and we'll see you next week.